Thank you all for listening to the Mind's Lens podcast. And again, thank you so much to all the guests that showed up, for giving me their time and their thoughts. It was really important for me to have the people who helped shape my ideas come on the podcast and just hear what they have to say. And I just wanted to hear their thoughts and be able to share that with you guys as well. There's a few things I want to go over as just some final thoughts on this whole podcast. My whole idea is, of course, seeing religions as incredible works of art. And I've talked about it a lot, but I really just want to go over everything again. Where this idea came from for me was in that religion and film class that I took. It made me realize I could look at any piece of art or any movie. It started with looking at any movie, and eventually I started looking at music or, paintings or other things. Not just in that class, but just looking at anything through a way of what is my relationship to this piece of media, and what is art in general. And I think when I started looking at it that way, I was seeing it changed how I saw art, first of all, because art is something that a team of people work on to create, to make somebody feel something. And I really enjoy when that feeling is something like very creative or like obscure, that I just sit and wonder, how did they come up with not only this feeling, but then how were they able to execute that to make me have that feeling? Like, that's incredible for me. And I think after taking my religion and film class, I first started looking at art that way. And then I started looking back to religion, because what is any human's relationship with religion? And it's always different. It's so different for everybody. And that's a huge thing that I've learned in my religious studies, is that it's all just so different. And we always try to apply someone else's, like if somebody else has a different religion, we try to understand them through our own perspective on what religion means to us. And even when we try to understand religion through like their way, it's still so hard to really step back far enough to let go of everything that we already have in our mind of what religion is. So I wanted to step far enough back to be able to see religion not as something so rigid, but as kind of an abstract idea, and approach it that way, and just see how I could go, where I could go with it. So I started really looking at religions as works of art last year with my religion and film class, and just that feeling that I get with art is kind of what I attached to religion, and that's where I wanted to go with it. And that's how I wanted to understand other people and their relationship to religion. And I don't think that religion is necessarily that feeling for everybody, but I think religion can be that for everybody, even if they don't really think about it that way. They might have some experience where they're just, they're really passionate. I think passionate's a really great word to use. When somebody's really passionate about their religion, that's kind of that feeling that they have that's just so excited. That's the feeling that I'm trying to get at with religion as works of art. So something that I want to mention is that, like I said at the very beginning in my prelude, I'm not necessarily religious, and I still tell people that. But it's hard for me to say I'm not religious because I don't want people to misunderstand that I don't appreciate it. And I think a lot of people who aren't religious, I don't think appreciate it either. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this. That's another reason why I wanted to talk about this, is just to show like you can be creative with how you, what your relationship to religion is. And I think a lot of people are very stuck in, at least around me, in a Christian world. A lot of people are stuck viewing it in a Christian way. And, I hear a lot of people say, like, there's no way people really believe X, or there's no way, like, Y really actually happened, whatever it might be. And I think, like, obviously religions will say things happened or people will believe them, but what is it that they're really believing? That's why I had episode 2 be about Judaism, because what I learned in that class, I read something for that class that really opened my mind. During like Moses's Exodus, we talked about parting the Red Sea, all the firstborn children dying, like all these things that God was making happen for 10 days or whatever it is. We talked about how it doesn't matter. It's not important to take that literally. We can take it literally, and there are things that we can prove right about it. Like the water does turn red at certain times of year. Like the swarms of flies or whatever it is, like they do hatch a certain time of year. But the point isn't that those things happened, but why they happened, and the fact that they all happened at once. It was more powerful. I'm getting kind of sidetracked, but basically just that taught me that you don't have to take it so rigidly. And there's a lot of, like, it's so much deeper than if you just look at everything literally. Sometimes you take it literally, and that's where like the deep meaning comes from, but it's not always the case. So anyway, that's kind of another thing I wanted to talk about. Was I think a lot of people miss out on, first of all, like even the religions that people are familiar with, when they say that they don't, I don't want to say like they don't believe in it, because you don't have to believe in it. It's not what I'm getting at. I just mean that there's something exciting to it. And I think a lot of people miss out on that. Just as seeing it as a work of art, like you don't need to attach yourself to it. You can just appreciate it as a work of art. And that's my big point. So I just mentioned how Judaism kind of taught me that, it's like a different kind of poetry to understand like the importance and the value, or just like the artistic value in what they were saying. And I want to mention, like, in Christianity, like all those stories that carry over from Judaism obviously still carry that. But Christianity has a kind of, like, the way that I can appreciate art in Christianity is I almost have come to see it as pretty material. Like, buildings are so grand. Christian buildings are so grand. Obviously, it's not just Christian. Like, most religions will try to build a really grand, like, temples or whatever it may be. But there's a certain, like, aesthetic to Christianity that is really cool. And there's always poetry in that material stuff, but also just the story itself. like I mentioned with Dr. Mason, or like I mentioned in episode 2, rather, um, the story of Jesus coming back to save us, and like the philosophers that have tried to understand that and grapple with that, like what that really means, like how far can you go into thinking about that stuff? The texts are just so dense, and I think that's what's super impressive to me, as well as kind of the aesthetic and the material culture. That aesthetic is so unique to Christianity, and I think that's something that's exciting as well. Buddhism has been really exciting for me because it's such a different way of thinking that it made me realize while I was learning about Buddhism, I was also learning about how Christian my worldview was than what I realized. And it's it's really hard to explain, but just learning about Buddhism and the religion itself and how different it is, it helped me understand what was Christian about it and where some of my ideas really come from, or my comprehension of reality really comes from. But it was really fun to explore, especially because the idea of enlightenment in general that idea itself is so abstract that it's indescribable, and it's so profound, and the whole religion is based around that profound feeling. So it was really exciting for me to start learning about it, especially since I had been looking into just seeing that kind of profound feeling as a connection, or as the point of religions. So I think Buddhism really makes a strong case for what I'm trying to get at. Because my whole point is seeing religions as incredible works of art, not just by, looking at the art they produce, but because they are a source of some feeling, like art is meant to be. The religion itself produces that feeling, and that's what's amazing to me. And Buddhism really, really, really does that. The reason why I didn't give any really examples of like art or music or movies that I like, other than, I gave the example of Star Wars because that was a conversation that I had with my brother, and I felt like it was a good way to explain kind of what I was trying to get at. But there's movies that have made me feel something. There's albums that have made me feel something where this idea really comes from. Like, this idea is so rooted for me. I get so excited about music. And I've gotten more into movies lately. And so that's really where my idea started from, was my relationship to like my favorite albums. But the reason why I didn't really want to give like my own personal examples is, one, I didn't want anybody to listen and think I was saying that those albums are the best at what I'm trying to say, or like this album is the best album ever made because it did this, or this movie is the best movie that's ever made because it did this. Because I don't want I don't want my idea to be limited to just those pieces of art. And in the same way, I don't want myself to look back at this project and think, oh man, like I didn't even consider these kinds of albums, or I didn't consider these kinds of movies, or I didn't consider like this kind of art, or, I wanted my idea to just be my idea, and I didn't want to put my own personal experiences into it, with, as far as art goes. But kind of taking a step back, like, why does all of this matter to me? Not, outside of just seeing religion as art, it's more about seeing something in a new way. And that's really what I've learned from religious studies. What I've learned from religious studies is not just, seeing religion as works of art, but what I've learned from it is to have the mental capacity to see something in such a different way. And I think that's why it's hard to explain why I think religious studies is so important. Because, a lot of people think it's seminary, first of all, which it's not. But it's also not just about learning the history. It is about challenging your mind and trying to change the way you see things because someone else sees the world differently. And religions are so useful to learn that because, religions are so big and we have so much information about them. They're big, population wise, they're big historically. So there's a lot to use from religion to be able to understand something differently, not just somebody differently, but what they believe, what they find important, the way they see the world. It's really, really challenging, and I always find myself feeling like I haven't stepped far enough back. At the end of every class, I always have this moment where I go, like, oh wow, like I finally like feel like I've stepped far enough back to see what this religion is getting at. And then the next semester, I take another class and I'm like, I've really not stepped far enough back. Like I'll never be able to get outside my worldview, but I'm challenging myself and getting better at doing it through religious studies. And I think that's something that's really, really important about religious studies. And it's important because if you can step outside of yourself in your own reality, challenging yourself that way is so difficult. But when I do, I genuinely feel smarter in a way that I never recognized what I thought smart was. It's not engineering. It's not science. It's not, there's a science to it, but it's not learning like that. It's different and it's so hard to explain, but it really challenges your mind. And when you overcome those challenges, it feels very, very rewarding. And I genuinely can feel myself get smarter. And I think it's useful because I'm able to challenge myself that way. I'm able to immediately recognize that what I think is not the only way to think, and what that really means. I'm not saying like, oh, I think this, but somebody else thinks that, so there's two opinions. But like, it's so like you have to step so far back, and it's so hard to explain how far back I have to step. But I've gotten better at being able to do that. And when I can understand somebody else's reality or some other reality or something else from a different perspective than what I might have, shown up with. I want to say huge, huge thanks again to the guests for helping me, giving me their time, talking with me, and teaching me what they did. My ideas come from their teaching, and it's so exciting for me to show up to my classes, because the professors, like the ones that were guests for this podcast, they are able to teach me something in a way that is so unique. They can't just write on the board what they want me to understand. They have to teach me to change my mindset, and that's so fascinating to me. So huge thanks to all my professors. Huge thanks to the professors that helped me with this. Huge thanks for them being a part of it and, giving me their thoughts. And thank you for listening. Thank you for being interested in what I'm saying. Hopefully you are able to try to take a step back. Even if I don't care if a single person listens to this and thinks, this is the way that they're going to see religion now. That's not my point. But just to be interested in approaching it differently, because that's what I'm interested in. So thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you were able to find something exciting in here. I know I enjoyed it. I don't know, I'm really proud of what I did with this, so I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you.